Hello and welcome back to Digital Games, where we explore how games help us grow, connect, and heal. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by a very special guest, Matt Omernick, whose background includes working as the art director at major game companies like DreamWorks Interactive, EA, and LucasArts, where he worked on major game franchises like the Medal of Honor series and Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, and most recently, co-founding and serving as the chief creative officer at Akili Interactive, a digital therapeutics company and video game studio that allows patients to actually play their medicine. That is like the coolest sentence to say out loud. Matt, thank you so much for coming to talk to me. How are you?
Thank you, Ami. I'm great. I'm great. It's really wonderful to be here and just expressing my gratitude to you for just your passion, enthusiasm, and just understanding this brave new world we're in, where the stigma of video games is hopefully vanishing here, and we're showing the world that these things can be used for great good. So yeah, thank you for everything that you're doing.
Yes, of course. Yeah, this is, like worlds colliding for me, right? This is the perfect subject for digital games, video games, and health coming together really in its truest form. So I'm so excited to dive into it, and we're going to get to that in just a second. I want to just thank you, viewers, for tuning into Digital Doc Interviews, where we talk to the people using video games to help have a positive impact on the world, people like Matt. Remember, you can catch Digital Doc Interviews live on twitch.tv/digitaldocgames, where you can participate in the show and maybe even get your questions read on air. But if you can't watch live, no worries. You can make your way to YouTube, where all of our content like interviews, let's plays, and impact reviews are posted and archived. If you like what we are doing here and want to help promote the message of positivity in games, go ahead and hit that like or thumbs up button and make sure to follow and subscribe to help support the channel. It really does help a lot. We are only 5 subscribers away from hitting the big 100 on YouTube, so if you can help that happen, I'll be so grateful. But that is all future talk, so let's dive into present talk. Matt, Achilles' first product on the market is a game called EndeavorRx. It's a kart racer, it's a collectathon, it's an endless runner type game, but it is also the first video game to receive FDA approval for the treatment of ADHD in children. How does a game treat ADHD?
Yeah, great question. Needless to say, we're really excited at Akili for not only EndeavorRx, but what is frankly a new industry here. And when we received FDA clearance back in, I think it was June, yeah, I mean, it's the first prescribed video game in history in the world. And it's a big deal for both the games industry and the healthcare industry. And I think both industries are now better because of this, which is really cool. And so, yeah, so EndeavorRx, as you pointed out, is a game a treatment really that looks and feels. You could think of it as like it's a treatment that is delivered through this vessel with which looks and feels and acts and plays like a video game, right? So very different than a pill, very different than other medical devices. So it is really a new category of medicine, and that's really what we're set out to do as a company, well beyond ADHD. But EndeavorRx, this particular product, yeah, is for pediatric ADHD, ages 8 to 12.
Okay. Wow, that's so exciting, and I think you hit it on the head. You know how this is revolutionary for the digital therapeutics side of things, for the health side of things, and the video game side of things. A real stamp of approval for video games that they can. There's so many use cases for them, really. So that's so exciting. And EndeavorRx, which is, like I said, your first product on the market, is, it's the first game, like we said, to get the FDA approval. I'd love to talk about, just for my own curiosity, that path to achieving that huge milestone. I mean, this, like we said, is so huge. EndeavorRx now stands hand in hand with other clinically validated treatments for ADHD, like Ritalin or Adderall. I'm sure either as an adjunct or an alternative. Matt, what excites you the most about this breakthrough for games and for digital therapeutics?
Yeah. So the choice for us as a company, I think, to take the FDA path is an important one, and I could talk a bit about that path. And hopefully we can kind of discuss how we even got to that point. But from the moment we founded Akili, we already had this wonderful technology that came out of UCSF, which we'll talk about, from a project I worked on called NeuroRacer, which was really the inception of the technology that led to this particular product at Akili. And when we founded the company, we knew right away that the FDA path was the way we wanted to go. And we had a lot of people tell us we were crazy. A lot of people, why would you do that to yourselves? And there's a lot of reasons. But I think some of the main reasons that we decided to do that is that we knew we had something entirely new, a new category of medicine. We knew we had something really effective and really powerful. We knew it was real medicine. And we did not want to risk it being kind of lost and misunderstood when we knew this was something really special. So taking this kind of long, hard road down the FDA path to make this actually a prescribed product and to make it unassailably medicine from a data point of view was super important, not just for this product or for Akili, but we felt for the industry in general, right? We knew that digital therapeutics, digital medicine, there's a lot of different names kind of in this digital health bucket, right? We knew that this was going to be the future and a very new, different kind of medicine. And that, hopefully my kids look back at the way we used to practice medicine and be like, why did you do that sooner?
You weren't always playing video games for treatment?
Right, exactly, exactly. So we knew this was very serious and very important. So when we founded the company, we invested in two really strong pillars. The first being, clinical validation, right? Legitimacy. This is why we invested it to date, I think, over 30 clinical trials at the company. And so that's a huge part of what holds us up as a company, as well as the entertainment side, right? We knew that we had this really special medicine, but we also know, like any medicine, if people don't take it, it doesn't do them any good. And it turns out that there's a lot of reasons why a video game turns out to be the perfect, like I said, vessel with which to deliver this kind of medicine, specifically for ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from a medical perspective, and I know that Akili's clinical validation studies have sort of showed similar points, is that the treatments, the drug treatments that we do have for ADHD, are not so clean and simple. They can have, not the best adverse effect profiles. So certainly it's always, when trying to start a treatment or thinking about starting a treatment for ADHD, it's always that question of how do you balance the benefit with the risk. That's true in any disease, in any, starting of any treatment, but certainly for ADHD, certainly in childhood diseases. And I could imagine that this only gives another, direction to go, another place to focus before you think about those drug therapies, or maybe, as a replacement for them altogether. So yeah, from the medical perspective, from the game perspective, it's really so neat. So
and like, as you pointed out, so I just want to jump in.
No, please.
So different than other treatments that have existed before, right? And that's one of the things that, to your earlier question, that excites me the most is that these new kinds of medicines are not only going to help people in new ways and make a huge impact on a lot of these populations and diseases and make people better, right? That's exciting. But I think we're also going to be able to use them to learn so much more about these disease populations in the real world, right? These are, on mobile devices, which are nearly ubiquitous at this point, and being able to have people interact with those devices and learn about what matters to them, learn new outcomes, right, that actually matter to people. That's the part that I think I'm most excited about. The stage we're at now is that this industry is now real, and we're about to enter these, I guess you could call them, giant real world clinical trials, right?
Right. I mean, I think we should really spend some time, talking about, certainly from a game design perspective, but also if you can shed any light on the medical side as well. I mean, what actually is happening here? You mentioned, that the game sort of acts as a vessel for delivering the treatment. Could you speak to how that was designed, how that was thought of even?
Sure. It's probably best to kind of go back to the early inception, right? And the caveat again here that I come from the entertainment industry and the games industry.
Of course.
Not the healthcare or medical. And I guess unless you count the last 8 years at Akili, I feel like I'm getting
That's
a
right.
PhD, which is so cool. So I think, yeah, it's probably best to go back to the early inception here, which is back to UCSF is where the originating technology for this particular product came out of. And at the time, I was really already very excited to see that some neuroscientists were starting to study existing games at the time off the shelves. And Dr. Daphne Bavelier, who's just absolutely amazing, happened to be studying a Medal of Honor. This is back in the 90s.
Wow.
And or early 2000s, and really starting to unearth that these things maybe aren't all bad, right? I'll never forget when we started Akili, we were interviewing some doctors, and there was one doctor in particular that was like, "Video games? That's the devil's instrument." So I'd always been fascinated by the neuroscience and psychology about games, right? And realizing very early on in my career that really good game designers were very similar to clinical psychologists, in the sense that we're both trying to find out what makes people tick and how to motivate them and how to, the cycles of challenge and reward. And so those similarities have become clearer and clearer and clearer over time. So I'd already kind of was in this headspace of like, oh, I know these video game things are so much more than what people give them credit for. And I think they have a bright future where they can do wonderful things.
Right.
So I met Dr. Adam Ghazali at the time at UCSF, who was also a big gamer, right? And when he and I met, we really started picking each other's brains like crazy. And at that point, it was pretty clear that we could do something special here. And he had spun up this wonderful study. This is where we brought in Noah Falstein, who you interviewed in September, I think. Wonderful, who's one of our best advisors here at Akili. And a couple of game designers from LucasArts at the time to build this early prototype called NeuroRacer, which was initially designed to study, I think, two things is what Adam was looking for. He wanted to, one, see if we could measure cognitive decline in different decades as we age, right? So there was a group of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I think all the way up to some people in their 80s. And it turned out that, yes, a video game could be sensitive enough to detect that cognitive decline between those groups. And it was pretty much what was predicted, right? Except I think it started earlier. Cognitive decline was more like in the late 20s or something, which was a little surprising and scary.
Right.
So that alone was fascinating, right? And this was this kind of very rough, like car driving on a road prototype type game. And so detecting that cognitive decline with a video game was already pretty revolutionary and amazing. But where it got really cool was Adam's concept that, okay, if we can detect that cognitive decline, can we train for it? Can we improve it? Can we make a difference there? And in the study, which landed on the cover of Nature, which I didn't fully appreciate, is like the Academy Award for a neuroscientist to get on the cover of Nature.
Yeah.
That really showed that, yes, not only could this detect that the nuanced differences between individuals' cognition, but could really, in many cases, take people that were in their 60s, 70s, 80s and start to get them to perform like some of the folks in their 20s.
Wow.
So Akili, this is the short version, believe it or not, as I ramble. But Akili, we were already founding this before the Nature paper. We knew that this was powerful, relatively safe, compared to a lot of other medicines, and we knew that a video game was the right way to go with this. So that's really how we started, and I think the reasons to use a video game, there's a long list. I think I actually have a slide where there's like 60 reasons why a video game is really great.
Right.
But if I had to pick one, I think for today's conversation, it's that video games are experiences. That's what they are, and we know from neuroscience that it's experiences that change the brain. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, right? In the case of PTSD, this S is actually changing the physiology of the brain. And watching a movie is an experience, but an interactive experience, one that has reward loops of feedback and challenge, is a much more potent and much more powerful experience. And so, when I think back to being a gamer and growing up and working in games and playing games my whole life, they've in a lot of ways become kind of experiences in the way that, like, you have a soundtrack to your life, right? The different games I've played over the years, like, they're a part of me.
Right, of course.
And I knew they changed my brain, right? And so I think the fact that a video game is not only a potent experience, but a highly controllable one is really important. And the adaptivity of what we do with our products is one of the secret sauces, frankly, right? It's being able to fine tune that challenge and reward for each individual to push them in the areas where they need to be pushed, to be able to actually make active change. And so I'll pause there because I know that was a ton, but hopefully that's kind of giving you a little bit more of the kind of understory of what's going on.
Right. No, it is. It's so fascinating. And it's interesting for me to hear that NeuroRacer started, it sounds like, focusing on cognitive decline, like you were saying. And then at some point, Akili with Endeavor RX took, a related concept but different and went with ADHD. But it sounds like there's probably a lot of use cases. I'm just kind of guessing for this secret sauce of different illnesses that can be treated. Is that right?
That is right. That's another, I think, one of the most fascinating things is the kind of core engine is the word that we use internally, not to be confused with Unity or Unreal, but this engine is the set of algorithms that actually activate the specific parts of the neural network that we want to activate during these experiences. In many cases, it spans different populations because in this case, attention, right? This is very much where we're focused with EndeavorRx. It is very focused on attention and improving our ability to be able to, inhibitory control and being able to multitask in ways that we couldn't before. So it's very squarely in that area. And this is where I'm probably getting out of my shoes here, into the neuroscience world. But what we do know is that is an issue in many different disease populations,
right?
Not just ADHD. And at Akili, we really are a cognition company, right? More so than just ADHD is our first kind of flagship product that is coming out, pediatric ADHD. But our true aim is to improve cognition in the world. Like we really see a future where everyone takes their mental health just as seriously as they do their physical health, right? And so being a cognition company, we are going to be helping populations across many diseases.
Right.
Things like we run studies in, depression, in Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, autism. So we have these different engines that we build that are really custom made to activate specific parts of the neural network that we want to, but these can be used across multiple disease populations and help a really wide range of people in different ways. So yeah, that is one of the things that we're most excited about these different engines and how we can impact as many people as possible.
Yeah. So focusing, I know we talked a lot about the medical side. Thank you for going over that because it's so fascinating. But also from the game dev side, and like you said, your background is coming from games, coming from blockbuster titles like Medal of Honor, right? What would you say has been the difference for you working for a digital health company making games versus working for a company like EA or LucasArts or another studio like that?
Yeah, a lot of differences. The number one is I think the mission. This is from my perspective, like being able to use these powers for great good and having this very clear, very deep mission. I can't possibly overstate like how much that means to me and how incredibly motivating and fulfilling that is. So that's a huge part that just feels different. Even though if you kind of look at the game studio, everything you see is game studio, right? But there's this common mission between all of us that everyone is so deeply passionate about. That results in an incredibly deep and fulfilling game development experience for sure. The other things I think that stand out as different is the creative challenge, right? Working on other games, it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, we're going to make a game about chipmunks, right? We're just picking something, right? And we have a whole bag of tricks as game designers that we can say, okay, let's use game design AB215 because that is tried and true and that's going to be great. We'll put a chipmunk on it, right?
Yeah.
There's a great temptation, I think, for developers to do that because we have these known tricks. But when you're building something like this, you are dealing with very, very specific scientific constraints.
Right.
Of the medicine needs to do this thing, and this thing to activate the brain. So we have to keep that core medicine completely firing on all cylinders, right? And we have to turn that into something that is that reward loop, right? And we have to reward people for doing the thing in the product that activates the brain. And so the creative box that we're in is much tighter and much smaller than we're used to. But the good news there is that we can't reach into that old bag of tricks, right? We have to come up with new game designs to be able to solve this and to stay within those constraints and still make something fun. And that's super hard,
Right.
but really rewarding and fulfilling because it creatively makes you kind of crack open a couple more layers that you wouldn't if you were working on just kind of a normal game. And so, the creative challenge and reward of having to do that, solving problems, knowing this is for great good, those are pretty different than working in the regular games industry. And so, one of the things I love to talk about when I'm out, especially talking to folks in the games world, is that there's a new industry for you, right?
Wow.
For designers and engineers and artists, where you get to use those powers for great good. So I highly encourage you to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, it sounds just like the place to be. I actually think this might be an interesting time to dive into a new segment for Digital Doc interviews, where I actually read or ask questions from you, from the audience. So if you want to write in with questions or comments or concerns for me and my awesome guests, you can follow me on Twitter at DigitalDocGames, where I post all of the information for upcoming episodes and post links where you can submit your own questions that I may choose to read on the air. An interesting question on the game dev side comes from Ami Charnoff, and he wrote in for Matt asking, what are your thoughts on using gaming, or VR, he says, specifically to use as exposure therapy for people with anxiety or phobias? Does the fact that users would know that the experience they are simulating is fake take away from the actual exposure and therefore not help them face their fears? Would making the experience more of a game and less of a straight-up simulation further retract or improve the benefits of traditional exposure therapy? So Ami wrote in and sort of focuses in on exposure therapy and anxiety and fears, which is, if that's something you know about or can talk about, absolutely, if you'd like to answer. But I also think the root of Ami's question is really, how do you strike that balance between games and treatment? And on one hand, going too gamey, and on the other hand, going too treatment-y, right? And how do you get in? What's the you know what I'm asking.
Absolutely, no, that's a super fun. Thank you, Ami, for the great question. Because there's some really good fun stuff to unpack in here. I'll start with just kind of the first part, which is exposure therapy in general. There's a lot of great work that has been done that's ongoing, especially with VR and mixed reality in that space. So, and I know there's been really exciting clinical trials run that show that yes, these types of tools like VR they're deeply immersive. So back to my point about experiences, if a video game on your iPad is a good experience or on your Nintendo is a good experience, in VR, it's probably more immersive, right? And so we really do believe that VR and MR are going to be a big part of this story as they start to become a little bit more common and affordable and user-friendly. So on the exposure therapy part, I think that is a very exciting new field that is already underway. And I think there's good evidence there. I don't have something I can point you to at this second. So then into kind of the second part, this concept of the realism of the experience versus something that's stylized. I don't know the exact answer, but I can tell you that we studied this phenomenon a little bit in one of our early studies for depression. We did a kind of little pilot game that we tested out where you were reacting to emotions that were presented to you on a character's face, right? Of varying degrees. And so it was kind of teaching or trying to test and train kind of emotional bias. What we know from the science in depression, right, is that someone that may be depressed, if they see what someone normally would say is a neutral face, they will interpret that as maybe somebody that's angry, right?
Right.
And so we were experimenting with this kind of morphing of different expressions to try to train that, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And one of the first questions we hit was like, wait a minute, so what is most salient? Like, what is it photoreal? Is it an actual human with every nuance of every micro expression? Or is it a smile? Is it an emoji? Like, and we had this big cool spectrum of all the different styles of characters, and we tested this and to see where it happened. And our findings there, who knows if this is true everywhere, was that it ended up being somewhere in the middle. It was the sweet spot of enough information on the face. It was a little bit more like I would say like a Pixar character.
Right, right.
Probably not a coincidence that
true.
style is very, very common and successful. So it ended up being the sweet spot between enough information to judge the emotion, um, but exaggerated, right? Exaggerated enough that you could get it across in an impactful, quickly salient way. And so I imagine that little test, this idea of character faces, might apply to Ami's question when you start to think about the experience being more realistic. If I had to guess, I would say it depends on what you're trying to train, right? And if it's agoraphobia, I think maybe very realistic might be the way to go. I don't know. But I think in other conditions, a stylized kind of slightly exaggerated experience is going to be the sweet spot.
Wow, that was a great answer. And it really highlights something you said in the very beginning of the interview, which is how your job as someone in games, as the creative director, is so similar and overlaps so much with I think you even said like clinical researchers, but sort of research and certainly user research, right? And it's so interesting to me the more and more that I do this to find how true that is across all domains of games. How game developers are such experts in the user profile, right? In figuring out what their users want, what type of product they need to have, how can it be successful. And again, it goes to your point of how there's so much new opportunity for so many people who want to get into games. That means something so different now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's really good to point out that what we're doing at Akili with other digital therapeutics, we're not just applying that game and entertainment experience to the treatment itself, just the game itself, right? We recognize that there's a whole lot in just medicine in general, like the experiencing of medicine, right? The patient journey for any kind of treatment that is, some of it's still in the dark ages, and some of it just, frankly, just is not good. It's not. And so we often take a look at every step at Akili that happens in the patient journey and stop and ask, like, okay, does it have to be that way? How could technology, or how could we maybe make that not scary, and in fact actually turn those moments into something that's engaging and fun and efficient, right? So a lot of what we're doing at Akili is well beyond just our treatment. So I'll give you an example. The EndeavorRx product, the pediatric ADHD, of course, the core treatment that the child is playing is a game, right, as we're discussing it. But there's so much that we build around that, right? So every step from kind of awareness to talking to your physician to getting a virtual prescription, from a virtual pharmacy, every step along that journey, all the way till someone's been on treatment for years, we're really looking at those and making those amazing. So in this example, we have the core treatment game, but the parent has what's called ADHD Insight, which is a totally custom app that we built for the parent, the teacher, the physician. We have a web dashboard where the parent is putting in on their phone symptoms and behaviors on a daily basis at whatever frequency they want, to really kind of start to unearth trends on how their child's doing, and to track behaviors and symptoms that actually matter to them, and share that information with the physician, right? And be able to see trends over time in the web dashboard. And this is stuff that, like, forget the treatment for a second, even that kind of measurement-based care doesn't really exist in a lot of these spaces. So a lot of what we're building, really, you can think of as, it's kind of an ecosystem of everything that we can use with technology to improve these patients' lives and their families' lives, and everyone that's kind of touching them and affected by this can kind of chip in and help move this forward. So we're always as excited about these patient journey moments and these additional tools as we are the core treatment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You hit it on the head. I mean, there's been lots of studies, and I can speak from experience also. But I think in general, doctors and healthcare professionals don't do a very good job, like you said, of understanding the patient experience, the patient journey, what happens to the patient when they leave the hospital. We're trying to get better. The healthcare system is trying to better. There's new, jobs in place for people, to reach out to these to patients. But it's so hard with so much going on, and I'm finding more and more, just like you said, how much technology can really help connect and fill in that gap. And it sounds that's exactly what Akili is doing. And you mentioned a really important point that I want to make sure that we talk about is that, this is EndeavorRx, right? This is RX. This is a prescription product. So this is actually a digital technology that physicians prescribe to their children-age patients, right?
Yeah, it is only available via prescription. At this moment, so 2021 is really when we're really rolling this out in a big way. Right now, we're working with a group of physicians and caregivers to really kind of, almost in a beta way, I guess is the word we would use in the games industry, right?
Yeah, right.
To work through the patient journey stuff specifically that I'm talking about, because we care so deeply about that. Like the treatment is amazing and been tested thoroughly and is wonderful, great, but that's just a part of this whole thing. To my earlier point,
Right.
so when we got the news on the FDA clearance again, which was really exciting, we ended up getting CE mark the same day, which was totally coincidental, which is really crazy.
It's a big day.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, when that kind of news went out, I think we were overwhelmed by the attention and response. Even given everything else that was going on in the world, I think people needed some good news.
Yeah.
And so huge response there, and the number of people that just kind of raised their hands, caregivers, physicians, was great. I mean, I think well over 30,000 people we had very quickly that said, hey, I want to know about this. And so we're catering, I think, to those folks right now, and to help kind of work out that exact journey right before we open this up in a major way. But yeah,
Right.
it is available only as a prescription. So with that alone is really unique and really different.
Wow. Yeah, that is so cool. I love it. A beta prescription trial period. No, it's just so exciting. I can't wait to hear more. And I am like such a big fan of what you're doing. I will certainly be following along. You can follow along digital.games. I promise I will be retweeting any news that comes out of Akili because it's so great. I have just a couple more questions before we stop. The one is, if you can tell us, it sounds like this is a big job right now with EndeavorRx, and we've already hit on a couple topics of areas of focus. But I was going to ask what's next for Akili, and it sounds like it's very much EndeavorRx. But even what do you see Akili? What is Akili in 5 years from now? What is Akili in 10 years from now?
Sure. I kind of alluded to this before, but we have always, and think about ourselves again as a cognition company, specifically. We recognize that there's such an under appreciation for the impact that cognition actually has on everyone's daily lives. For unfortunate reasons, COVID, I think, has started to highlight that even more, right?
Right.
And so, that's something that we're even interested in the shorter term. And if we think we can actually really help, it turns out that there's pretty significant cognitive impairment that can happen in recovering COVID. Not to mention, I just think the tension of the world that we're in, and we're all kind of still stuck, and that does take a toll on some of these core abilities, right?
Yeah.
So I think the world is starting to see, and the average person is really starting to see how important cognition is. And so, I think the big true mission, the purpose of Akili is to forward that understanding, right? And so we can get attention on it, we can help it, and we can really fix a lot of these areas that we think are core to a lot of other problems that can happen in life.
Right.
I think really, really smart insurers and payers are starting to really pay a lot of attention to cognition, right? Because in some ways you can think of it as preventative medicine. And to your point earlier, the touch points that physicians have with the patients is not as much as they would like, right? From even the moment when someone's healthy to maybe starting to get sick, wouldn't it be great to kind of know those moments early on and be able to track and interact with patients and physicians at a higher frequency? I think we can do these kind of things. And what we'll start to see is hopefully catching some of these cognitive issues early that might manifest and turn into other things down the road that are not so great, and be able to catch them. So, getting back to your question, I think cognition is really where I think we're going to look like in 5 to 10 years. Is hopefully the average person is really aware of their cognition and taking care of it, and they're thinking of companies like Akili immediately as like, that's where I go to have truly a really good connection with the company, and knowing that we are an incredibly validated, data-centric, real medicine company that can actually help people with cognition, from pediatric ADHD all the way into dementia and Alzheimer's and a lot of these different areas. So,
absolutely.
That's really, I think, where we will be. And not every product we're going to make will be necessarily a deep game, right? We're going to use any kind of technology that we have or can develop to help these different areas.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I do have one just gaming question for you that I like to end on. Uh, Matt, I'm gonna take a guess and say that you don't just make games, but you've played a few over the years. Do you have a favorite gaming memory, or if it can be an impactful one, that's great. But even if it's just something that comes to mind, I'd love to hear it, and I could even give you a couple seconds to think because I did not prep you for this.
That's all right. That's all right. Sure. I mean, yeah, now probably get to some very specific ones, but I would say I almost think of them as kind of bundles, over time, right? I mean, I have this sweet bundle of, I mentioned this earlier, like the soundtrack to my life, right? I think
Right.
I think of kind of the games and the time periods I played the certain games, like they have changed me, they have affected me deeply, and I associate them with very specific times in my life. But it starts back in the old arcade game days, right? And just plugging quarters day and night with my buddies, and playing games like Sinistar that Noah Falstein made, right?
Right. There you go.
And being in the old classic mall arcades for probably way too much time, and I don't even know where I got all those quarters. But that
Couch
was very
cushions.
very much a moment. And I watched Stranger Things, and I'm just like, oh my God, that was me and my friends, right?
Right.
So there's that kind of era of that feeling, right? And then there's the at home, the Nintendo, the original NES, and what I remember most from there was the social aspect of that, right? The time that I spent with who now are two of my best friends still to this day, right? Um, we were in the basement. We played every single one of those games, right? But it was about the games, but it ended up being, in retrospect, about the relationship and the
Totally.
shared memory and the soundtrack to the life there. And this is before social games, right? But they were, and so I kind of have that bundle of really meaningful experiences where those memories it's my friends, right? And the depth of those relationships were established there, and video games had a lot to do with that. And then I think I kind of go into this other stage of fascination and impact on me, which was understanding how games are made, like seeing, being in the factory and realizing how hard they are to make.
Wow. Yeah.
If making games were easy, everyone would do it, right? And but that's something that kind of flipped me from being more in the film and TV side. Once I kind of made my first game, I was like, oh man, this is what I want to do, because it's really hard. And solving some of these problems and making something look great from every 3D angle, and just developing games is a really challenging uh, area to be in. So I really fell in love with that. So that's that third bundle of experience for me, where it's like in there, seeing how the sausage is made, making the sausage,
Right.
and making something really cool. Massively fulfilling for me to this day.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Well, it seems like you are quite good at it, and really taking that passion and doing something really important. So from myself, from everyone on the Digital Doc Care team, for everyone viewing live, really, Matt, thank you so much for using games to make a difference, for giving me something to talk about. That's always fun. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Matt, if people want to follow you, if people want to follow Akili and their progress with EndeavorRx and future products to come, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, probably right to our website, akiliinteractive.com. That will link you to pretty much any piece of information you want to know about us as a company, about the industry. There's a Digital Therapeutics Alliance that we're a huge part of that really starts to talk and define this new industry and what is a digital therapeutic. I encourage people to educate themselves there. But yeah, learn about these products and try to get your head wrapped around this very new world and this very new opportunity and industry that we all have in front of us now. So yeah, just you start with our website, and we're an extremely open and eager and collaborative company. So we love to talk to everyone. We love feedback. We really like to engage directly with anyone that is at all involved with Akili or any of our products. So very open. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it sounds good. I'm so excited for this future. I'm so excited for everything to come. A future where you can play your medicine. It sounds so great. Thank you for everyone for coming on and watching, or if you're watching later on YouTube, thank you so much. If you like the video, remember to like and subscribe. Help us get to that 100 goal where we get our own unique URL for YouTube to make it easier for people to come find us. I appreciate everyone who's watching these videos and everyone who I can come and just talk to for as long as I can. So thanks everyone, and game on. See you next time.